Have you ever finished a completely normal day and felt completely wiped out? Not just tired, it's the kind of exhaustion where your brain feels foggy, your body feels heavy, and even the thought of replying to a text message just feels like too much. Then you start asking yourself, like, why do I even feel so exhausted when I didn't even do that much today? For many of us, the answer is something we almost never talk about, and it's called masking. And many of us have been doing it for so long that we don't even realise how much energy it's draining us. Masking trauma, masking neurodivergence, masking grief, trying to appear fine while your nervous system's quietly carrying far more than anyone else can see. Today, I want to talk honestly about that. And please, if you're able, let me know in the comments how you feel. Because what many people don't realise is just how exhausting masking is. And for some people, can actually make them more vulnerable to trauma, exploitation, and burnout. Talk about why masking happens, why trauma, grief, and neurodivergence can make burnout much more likely, and what research is beginning to show. How we can protect ourselves and our children from living permanently behind a mask. And this comes from the perspective of someone who has learnt these lessons the hardest way possible. As a grieving mother, I never want another family to experience a preventable loss. Understanding what happens inside our nervous system is part of protecting people. Before we start, though, I just want to say that this conversation will touch on trauma, burnout, grief, and the health impact of carrying stress for long periods. I'm not going to talk any graphic details, but if you're feeling fragile today, please take care of yourself while you're watching. Pause if you need to. Come back and watch another day if that feels better. What masking actually means. Masking is the quiet effort of trying to appear okay when inside you don't feel okay. Trying to appear calm, trying to appear normal, trying to appear like you're coping, even when you're feeling really overwhelmed. For many neurodivergent people, masking starts in childhood. Researchers sometimes call this camouflaging. It means adjusting your behaviour so you blend in socially. That might include things like forcing eye contact, copying other people's behaviour, rehearsing conversations, either in your head or out loud, hiding sensory overwhelm, pretending you're not struggling. But masking's not only about neurodivergence. Trauma survivors often learn something very similar. And if you grew up needing to read the room carefully, your nervous system becomes extremely good at monitoring other people. You learn to adjust yourself to stay safe. And grief creates another kind of masking. Many grieving people learn very quickly that the world is uncomfortable with visible grief. People are often kind at the beginning, but over the time, the expectations becomes that you should be coping now, you should be over it. Your person died is not that you're living with the fact they died every day. So many people start hiding their grief to make other people feel comfortable. And they'll say, I'm fine, even when they're not. That's also a mask. In the last decade, researchers have started studying masking more closely. Studies involving autistic adults show that people who mask heavily often report higher levels of anxiety, depression, chronic stress, emotional exhaustion. Masking requires constant cognitive effort. Your brain is monitoring social cues, adjusting behaviour, and suppressing natural responses. Have you ever noticed that you seem completely calm in front of other people, and then the moment you're alone, your body just suddenly collapses into exhaustion? Trauma research shows something similar. And when the nervous system stays in a state of hyper-awareness for long periods, it consumes enormous amounts of energy. Your brain is always scanning, is this safe? What do I need to say? How should I act? That level of vigilance is exhausting. Grief research shows another layer. Bereavement can affect your sleep, concentration, immune function, stress hormones, and physical health. When someone is grieving and masking that grief whilst also navigating trauma or neurodivergence, the nervous system's carrying multiple loads at once. Eventually, the system runs out of energy, and this is something many people recognise in their own lives. Have you ever noticed that you seem completely calm in front of others, holding everything together, appearing capable, and then the moment you are finally alone, your body suddenly collapses into exhaustion? Sometimes that sudden crash is not weakness, it is the moment your nervous system finally stops performing. And that leads us into something many people eventually experience: burnout. There is another difficult reality researchers are increasingly recognising. Neurodivergent people are statistically more likely to experience abuse, exploitation, bullying, and victimisation. Large studies suggest that around 44% of autistic individuals report experiencing some form of victimisation during their lifetime, significantly higher than the general population. Autistic children are estimated to be 2 to 3 times more likely to experience bullying, and autistic women experience significantly higher rates of sexual violence and exploitation. There are several reasons for this. Some relate to communication differences, some relate to difficulty recognising manipulation, some relate to increased dependence on others, but masking can also contribute in a less obvious way. When someone has spent years learning to hide confusion, discomfort, or distress in order to appear normal, it can make it harder for others to notice when something is wrong. The natural signals that someone feels unsafe may be hidden. Some research exploring social camouflaging suggests that heavy masking can be associated with higher levels of victimisation. Not because masking causes abuse, but because distress signals that might alert others are concealed. In other words, a strategy that helps someone survive socially can sometimes make them more vulnerable to people who exploit that effort to appear okay. This is why environments where neurodivergent people are allowed to be authentic are so important. When people can express discomfort openly, boundaries become clearer and support can arrive earlier. If you are recognising yourself in some of this, please know that nothing we're talking about here means you are weak or broken or to blame. Often it just simply means your nervous system adapted in order to survive. When the mask becomes too heavy, what people often call burnout can sometimes be the moment the mask just becomes too heavy to hold. Burnout doesn't always look dramatic. Often it arrives quietly. Extreme fatigue, difficulty concentrating, feeling emotionally numb, withdrawing from people, struggling with tasks that used to feel easy. For some people, burnout becomes severe. Long-term burnout and chronic stress are linked with depression, physical illness, and feelings of hopelessness. Some studies have also found that severe burnout associated with an increased risk of serious health problems and higher mortality over time. That doesn't mean burnout automatically leads to death, but it does mean that it should be taken seriously. Burnout is not laziness. It's often a warning sign that the nervous system has been under too much strain for too long. I think grief masking deserves its own space because so many people do it and they get praised for it. People say things like, "You're so strong, you're coping so well, you're amazingly resilient." But sometimes what they are seeing is not strength, it's suppression. The grieving parent answering messages while dissociating. The person returning to work while their body's still in shock. The person comforting everyone else because there's no room for their own pain. When grief stays hidden for too long, it often comes out sideways. It shows as exhaustion, as illness, as anxiety, as emotional numbness, as feeling disconnected from life. There is a difference between private grief and masked grief. Private grief can be protective. Masked grief is when you feel like you're not allowed to have needs at all. That is a very lonely place to live. Let me talk about why bereaved parents are especially vulnerable to burnout. Bereaved parents often experience an additional layer of pressure. Society doesn't really know how to sit with parental grief. People may initially offer support, but over time, many parents feel an unspoken expectation to become functional again, to return to work, to carry on, to appear resilient. Many parents also feel a deep responsibility not to worry the people around them, so they minimise their pain, they mask, they become the strong one. But grief following the death of a child is one of the most profound stresses a human nervous system can experience. Research shows bereaved parents often experience a higher level of physical illness, sleep disruption, and long-term stress responses. When that grief is masked rather than supported, the emotional load becomes even heavier. Trauma changes how the nervous system works. If you've experienced threat or unpredictability, your brain becomes very skilled at detecting danger. Psychologists call this hypervigilance. Your brain is constantly asking, is this safe? How should I behave? What will keep me out of trouble? If you combine hypervigilance with masking, something intense happens. You're not just living your life, you're performing it, monitoring yourself, monitoring others, adjusting constantly. That takes enormous mental energy. Over time, the nervous system becomes really overwhelmed. And when abuse comes from someone you trusted, the nervous system learns something really confusing. It learns that safety can suddenly become danger. Later in life, vulnerability can feel risky. Part of you knows you need support, but another part of you, your nervous system, may still believe that asking for help could lead to harm. So showing fear or weakness can feel incredibly unsafe, which creates another layer of masking. Many systems aren't designed to recognise mass distress. Schools, workplaces, and health services often look for visible signs of crisis, but people who mask well often appear capable. They perform, they function, they hold everything together, which means their distress can go unnoticed until things become severe. Sometimes the people who are struggling the most are the ones who appear to be coping the best. There are often subtle signs that someone is masking distress. For example, constant exhaustion that doesn't improve with rest. A person who always appears calm but becomes overwhelmed in private. Someone who takes on responsibility for everyone else but rarely asks for help. People who withdraw quietly rather than expressing distress. And someone who says, I'm fine automatically, even when their body language suggests otherwise. Or someone who appears highly capable but frequently crashes emotionally when they are finally alone. These signs can be easy to miss because the person is still functioning in public. But functioning doesn't always mean thriving. Sometimes it simply means someone is working incredibly hard to hide their pain and get through each day. One of the most important questions is how we prevent children from feeling they must hide themselves. Children thrive when they feel psychologically safe to be themselves. Instead of asking, what is wrong with this child, we can ask, what might this child be experiencing? Helping children to understand their nervous system builds self-understanding rather than shame. A compassionate shift, perhaps the most important shift, is this. Moving from asking, what is wrong with this person? To asking, what has this person experienced and what does their nervous system need? If you recognise yourself in this conversation, please know that you're not alone. Many people are quietly carrying the invisible weight of masking trauma, masking grief, masking neurodivergence, trying to survive environments that never quite fit. Burnout is painful, but sometimes it's also the moment the body asks for something more honest. And if we can create homes, schools, workplaces, and communities where people are allowed to be themselves from the beginning, perhaps fewer people will reach that point of exhaustion later. Sometimes the strongest people you know are the ones who learned very early that showing vulnerability once led to harm. Take gentle care of yourself today. But before you go, I want to leave you with a small reflection. If you are someone who has spent years masking trauma, grief, neurodivergence, masking how overwhelmed you are really, please know that the exhaustion you feel is not a personal failure. It may simply be the cost of surviving environments where it was never truly safe to be yourself. And if you're watching this and thinking about someone in your life who always seems strong, always coping, holding everything together, it might be worth just asking them how they really are. Because sometimes the people who look the most resilient are the ones carrying the heaviest invisible weight. If any part of this video resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might help someone else, maybe helping them realising they're not alone. Conversations like this are how we slowly build safer places for people to be honest about what they're carrying. Take extra care of yourself today. Sometimes healing begins the moment someone finally feels safe enough to take the mask off. If you haven't already, please subscribe.